So for today's vignette, we're going to be speaking with Al Shaib in his domain. And Morin, as you enter into Al Shaib's domain, the same sort of like puff of smoke going in here happens, and his domain changes, depending on a bunch of different things, but it is quite close to I think the last time the group was in here for any extended period of time, and it shows a man that actually looks quite close to this, with sort of stars sort of studded on his shoulders and back, looking up into a starry night. And around him, it looks like he's on top of a mesa. There's a plain that's all around. You can see bluffs in the distance in every direction. And as you step into Al Shaib's domain, he sort of turns towards you. He doesn't turn his body towards you, but he turns his head towards you, and says, "Hello, my friend. Welcome. I regret you cannot stay for very long, but such is the way of messing with powerful forces."
Does my shadow impact our ability to face to face?
He smiles and says, "No, there is an understanding between your old shadow and me. What will affect things is what has been done to this place. I forgot the frailty of mortals before, and I will do my best not to do so again. I do not wish you to suffer the same fate as those that were my longer term guests."
Is this a weather effect?
It is not a weather effect.
I've been holding on to this damn weather card for a year. Ah, I say. Well, I hope the brevity will not undermine the quality of the advice that I seek from you. I know that you value those who come to you for knowledge's sake. And I hope that you will understand my motives as conjoined with yours, and also to seek greater knowledge of this world that you now understand we are trying to remake.
He just nods.
Okay. Al-Shaib, we have known you only as a Maharaji Djinn, but we know that you were once she, that you served the primordials, and that you served the courts of summer.
And it is in my nature to do so still.
To advise primordials or to serve the summer court?
One in service to the other.
Okay. My companions and I seek to free you, and the bonds that are on you now are not the bonds that were placed on you by the Accords. Is that right?
It is true. I am diminished, but I still have power and knowledge yet. There are blank spots in my mind and blind spots in my power. But I was restricted, even past what I was at the end of the war between the primordials and the gods. Restricted quite further by their actions of their faithful, by the actions of those that wish to use me for their own ends, and usually suffering for it. But I still know a great many things. But I find the things that are the key pieces, the parts that explain the context of the world, is what I miss. He gestures up at the night sky, and you can see that the sky is full of stars, but there's this like big like arc in the sky that's dark where there's no stars at all. And on the left side of the arc, there's like definitely less stars, but they're brighter. And on the right side of the arc, there's lots more stars, but none of them are quite as bright as the ones on the left. So he's got a sky full of stars, seldom and bright on the left, then this big gap, and then a bunch of smaller, less bright stars on the right.
And what do these represent?
What little I have from before the primordials were bested. He gestures towards the spot with a few very bright stars. And then he points to the other side and says, "What little I have gleaned from dealing with mortals and others since I have been in some version of freedom." And then he looks at the big gap in the middle and says, "What my power and the power of others have done to alter my knowledge and power."
We have our group has removed some of your bonds and some of your chains. And Josh remembers that it happened twice that he dropped chains, right?
One major time.
One major time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we dropped the nuke into the chamber?
Mm-hmm. A little afterwards, when you were asking if he was okay, he opened one of the gates into his realm and then put his arm through and just dropped the smoking chains on the deck.
Yeah. We know that we seek an individual who we think can break most of your bonds, but how is it that we were able to break one of your chains? Or how were you able to break one of your chains?
The power of the ancient ones and the power of those that came after, they are orders of magnitude stronger than what you find in most places of the world these days. I was able to break some of my more inconvenient restraints. The ones on my physical body are mostly clear. However, that does not mean I am free to act. These things are not so easily broken. It is not a measure of power to destroy. It is not a measure of my own strength in order to break free. There is my nature to take into account. This is a binding. And while you can tell that he's like gesturing to his chest is always faced away from you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a binding that I cannot will myself to desire to break. It causes me pain, it limits me, it diminishes me in many ways, but it is a contract, something agreed upon, a price that was paid, and a price that was met. It is even difficult to think about the concept of being free, because it is in my nature, my original she nature, to keep a bond, to keep a contract. And yet it is still within my nature as she to use such things to my advantage.
The bonds that tie you to this ship, is it a corruption of this need for a contract? Or is it something separate?
It is a carrot placed before one who does not wish to do a task. When I was in the hand of the Efreet, it knew it had power over me. It knew it could force me to do a great many things, but in order to do what it truly wanted, to create the binding that it truly wanted, it needed me to agree to the contract on a deeper level than simple mad pain. It had to be truly binding. Even if what I gained was unequal, I needed to gain something in order for the contract to be truly binding, for it to be something recognizable by my nature and the nature of others like me. The bond with the ability to move, to change, to be a part of the mortal world. That was the agreement made. That is the bond you sense between me and the ship now. It has been with me and other objects in the past. This is just the newest version of my containment being made more palatable for me and being made stronger for my captors because it has my agreement to a certain degree.
So if Josh is understanding this correctly, it seems that the Ifrit wanted this ship to harness Al-Shaib's power. But in order to get that harnessing, there had to be a contract made where Al-Shaib willingly agreed to do that. And so the Ifrit gave him the ability to interact with the mortal world as his part of the deal.
Sort of reversed. So what he's saying is the Ifrit wanted to bind him tightly, to have the greatest binding on him as possible. Mm-hmm. And Al-Shaib says that in order for that to work with one of the Shi, he needed to kind of agree to it. And so the idea that Al-Shaib is bound to the ship is a compromise, because it's not you're stuck in a rock at the bottom of the ocean, unable to interact or do anything. You're basically gone and forgotten. That type of binding, Al-Shaib says he wouldn't have, no part of him would have agreed to it, so it would have been much weaker. The Ifrit, in order to bind Al-Shaib more strongly, needed to basically get to a compromise. And the compromise in the agreement was, yes, he is still bound, but he is also connected to something that is within the mortal world that will be interacted with by mortals, so that he can still reach out. So it's a stronger individual binding, but he's also sort of creating a potential way out for himself.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm trying to think. So I think, I guess this is more in talking. Does this Ifrit hold your bond? And were he to release it, would that get rid of this binding?
He thinks about it for a moment and then says, in the ways that mortals see such things, he does not hold anything. There is no object, no token, no piece of myself that is contained within his possession. What is here is a piece of will, and that will, being intact, being desirous of me being contained, is what keeps me here.
Is that a piece of his will or yours?
Both of our wills are needed for the contract to remain. That is why it is something of such strength. I have made the bargain. Whether I like the bargain and whether it is crippling me or not is not a reason to stop upholding my end of the bargain. It's the same with the Efreet. Although it is not in his nature to keep a contract, it is in his nature to try to control other things.
So for your binding to this ship to be broken, you or the Ifrit must no longer wish to keep the bargain?
That is a way, yes. If the Efreet were to decide it no longer wished me to be imprisoned, our contract would be over. I would no longer will myself to be contained within this vessel, and I would be free. I am she. One of the Matmaraj cannot go against their own will, their own nature to do what they have agreed upon doing. This cannot be done for me. In doing so, there is a risk of contamination. I would need to go so far against my nature that the bonds that protect those creatures of nature that exist would no longer protect me. I believe this is a fate much worse than imprisonment.
Yeah, I think we've seen the consequences of that kind of bond breaking. Um,
So he nods when you say that, and he says, yes, I have become aware of the fate of the winter night.
are you able to see him
The
to
night
know
of
where
winter.
he is?
It is knowledge that I do not have, my friend, but it is knowledge that I could have if one were compelled to properly ask. I am starting to understand what my limitations are now that I am in more comfort to explore the bounds of this prison.
From your understanding, will the winter courts require a new knight? Or is there any rehabilitation once that bond has been broken?
He shakes his head and says, the presence of the knight is not a requirement. It is very common, but it is to serve a purpose. Many knights of both winter and summer do not serve for their entire lives. There have been instances in the past where a winter or summer knight have served for a single evening and then gone back to their lives. The purpose of the summer and winter night is to have mortal agency, to do what needs to be done for the courts, to break through if there is a paradox of nature. To answer your other question, I do not believe rehabilitation is possible. But it would not be important for the knight to be rehabilitated. Its power is vested only in the will of the lady and her queen. The Lady of Winter would need only to will that the knight was no longer hers, and it would be so.
Is the Witch of the Fengrove a winter knight?
He gives you a strange look and goes, You speak of things that have questions that the question is wrong. But no, the witch of the Fangrove is no knight.
But she served the Winter Court before, yes?
She is she.
Okay. um, I want to go back to your bonds and in what ways they limit you. Does your nature as ascribed by the Accords, were you to act in your nature, would your binding to this ship prevent you from doing so?
It is within my nature to keep my contract, and in keeping the contract with the freight that bound me, keeping my contract with this ship and how it functions, that is in my nature. But I do not know exactly what you mean. There are no ways for me to break these bonds and be within my nature, at least not ones that I have been able to think of or uncover in a very long time.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so you have been bound to this ship as part of a contract. Does your contract allow you to observe what goes on this ship? And have you been able to do so since being bound to it?
I am bound to an object contained within the construction of this vessel. I can have limited ability to see and understand what happens around the object, and sometimes that covers a significant portion, or at least the important portions of your ship, but sometimes it does not.
My companions and I are committed to warring with the adversary and his agents, as I'm sure we've made clear already. Um, can you offer any direction on where the corruption of the adversary has infiltrated the Church of the Elements?
So Al Shaib smiles and says, understand that my perception of that thing is very limited. These stars are my personal memories. Since I have been bound and since I have been listened, the memories I have are very faint compared to what I could have known before. I cannot, in this place, do ritual to see what I would like to see. My power has great limits. If you say that there is an elemental church, then I must know of it by context, by story, by seeing what others have done around things that I can perceive. But I cannot reach out into the greater world without having a reason, without having part of my nature invoked, without being asked the question properly. But there are things that a scholar such as I can learn with context, and there is context that is worth mentioning here. While I do not have any contextual references to adversary infiltrations within this church, there is an agreement. Not a bargain like one made with me or with greater creatures, But there is an agreement made with your church that allowed them to procure the use of my vessel, the use of my binding. It works well for me as it gives me access to mortals and has allowed me to change things slightly to where the mortals I am speaking with are better suited to my needs. But that agreement was with the city of Brass, with the Efreet. I believe this was more of a subservient relationship than one made between equals or between partners. The heart of your church, I believe, is not made of one of you lesser Djinn. I believe the heart of your church is an Efreet.
That makes a little bit more sense, actually. um, is it the same Ifrit?
He shakes his head and says, I am too limited to know. Without being asked, I have no ability to draw upon the energies and knowledges I would need to make that assumption, but if it is not the same one, Misan al Harik bin Sadir al Samira sent this Efrit. They are fractious, self serving creatures, but as far as I've been able to ascertain, the one that bound me is still currently atop the city of Brass and has all other Efreet with any sort of standing in their society under him.
Okay. Just because, well, Morin was thinking just because Al-Harik is the title for senior pyromancer.
It is indeed.
Which I guess makes sense even if it's an underling, being like borrowing the guy's name for his title. Okay. Um, interesting. So I think Morin would be interested in providing some context to Al-Shaib to get at an answer to a question, something along the lines of, are chaos elementals, and this might have actually come up in one of the early sessions and I've forgotten. Were the chaos elementals aboard the ship aberrant?
They were not.
Okay. So like it seems that the adversary is like the concept of nothingness, or like maybe like absolute chaos. Like they seem to have chaotic aspects to them. But chaos elementals are not necessarily inherently adversarial. Okay. All right. Um, to the extent, do elementals have nature in the same way that like she do?
There are some of the greater elements that have either natures or something close enough to natures to have similar protections to what we have.
Could these chaos elementals, and perhaps the sickness that they can spread, serve as a conduit for the adversary to touch our world?
He sort of waves the question away when you ask and says, it is important when speaking in terms of knowledge that one uses terms. If we are using terms that mean different things, we are not speaking with each other, yes? We are speaking past each other. To call thing a thing, it must be the same name that we use. Names are important for creatures such as us, but also for general knowledge. You call these things chaos elementals. That is a modern construction. That is not what they were called. Not back when they were interacted with enough to have proper name.
What were these creatures called?
In the times of my freedom, they were called demons.
Demons. Like the enemies of divine creatures?
Is that what Morin would ask?
Yeah. Or like the counterparts of divine creatures?
He shakes his head. So much has been lost, it is difficult to know where to start with an explanation. But no, the demon was an enemy of many, many things. It cared more about itself, its hunger, its appetites, the things that it desired to do, and it was a chaotic creature. To call one of these things a chaos elemental is not wholly wrong, but in understanding a demon, you have to understand what made it a demon, why it functions and acts as it does. To say it is purely with chaos, it is not the same thing. It is not fundamental chaos that the demon acts with. It is an absence of law, an absence of order that is inflicted on a societal level. An individual demon may not be very chaotic at all, but it is unlikely it will follow anything other than the strong. It is unlikely it will keep its word. They are deceitful creatures, more than they are creatures of the madness and chaos of the outer side. These are things that are enemies of many, but they are defined by a single enemy, and that enemy is not divine in nature. No, that enemy were devils. They and the demons were their greatest adversaries.
The devils and the demons were greatest adversaries?
It is so.
And what are devils? Or what were devils?
Devils are creatures of great evils, some of which were previously servants to gods, but not all. They are creatures of their own motivations, but in many ways, like she. It is in their nature to twist contract, but it is in their nature to keep contract. It is what they are. In my time, they were called devil, but I have seen enough and known enough, especially from listening to people on other planes. The ship stopped for a great time, and I was able to listen to many others. Able to listen long enough that they used a name I recognized. In some of the texts, when discussing demons, they may call them beings of chaos and evil. They could be called a phage for the ones that fed and consumed others. There were terms and terminologies used for all kinds of contexts, and one could be led back to understanding that this is a demon that we speak of. In the same manner, when I heard the name Arandari, that name makes sense to one such as I. A descriptor, not a name in purpose. It is the wrong title to give them, but it is a title that is given to devils.
The devils may now be called Alandari?
As far
Or
as I can tell.
given the title Alandari.
Basically, he's saying that Alandari is a title, is a descriptor that could be applied to devils, and that was, and listening to people, he was able to reach the conclusion that he's pretty sure that what people are calling Alandari today are what the people in his age would call devil.
Okay. Now, the Alandari is that river that runs through the plains, right?
Yes. Oh, the Alandar, but yeah.
The Alandar. And the Legion is fighting against Chaos Elementals on the banks of the Alandar.
The Legion usually doesn't fight them. The Legion sort of watches to make sure that they don't
Oh,
get a
right, because the
foothold.
Chaos Elementals were attacking the Alandari.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the only thing that we really know about the Alandari is that there were 3 of them in Gorderic.
Mm-hmm. And the
And
specific one that you guys decided you wanted to talk to was not there when you went to go talk.
right. And that those 3 Alandari are somehow getting the automated defenses of Gorderic to run.
Yes.
Bedvere looted this spear from the Alandari. A vault of the Alandari. Not necessarily from Gorderic, though. Do we know it's from Gorderic?
You know it's on the same plane, but it's not close to where the teleportation point is on the map. Because I think I always get the name of the city wrong, but I think it's Antio Garish is the name of the city.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, so I have Maganarish, and I think that was the name of the is that the name of the Alandari that Bedvere killed? Slash.
It's the name of the one that was holding the spear.
So Maganarish is the name of the Alandari that was holding the spear.
Correct.
And the vault was located in Antio Garage, and that's where Bedvere killed the guy.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And Antio Garish is on the plane of Guerderic, but Guerderic is really big. So like, that is a city on the plane of Guerderic, but it is not very close to the route that people use to go in and out of Guerderic.
Okay. The place that we jumped to in Gorderic. What was the name of that city?
There wasn't any name for you guys that was given for the city itself,
Okay.
because you guys basically portaled above the city, did some stuff, and then you went back to the Legion outpost, and that's where you spent most of your time.
Yeah. Okay. We did go into the city to try to meet the Alandari.
Correct.
And ended up meeting with Hercator.
Correct. And that's where you guys went into the vaults.
Okay. But we never learned the name of the city. Okay. So demons have a nature to twist, but also to keep contracts.
Do you say that to him? Or is this like more in kind of spitballing what he remembers?
Or no, that was devils. That was devils.
Because he would correct you.
Yeah. I did not put in a space in the middle of my paragraph. Okay. So the Alandari aren't really elementals then. Is that right?
You mean so the Alandari aren't elementals? Correct.
Okay. And the chaos elementals are elementals.
They are elementals. Yes.
Okay. And so then an Ifrit, which is an elemental, loans out this ship to do research on those chaos elementals. Intriguing.
I will take a moment and say you guys got a lot of information about what the ultimate goal of that research is. Do you remember?
Yeah, isn't it to weaponize the abyssal plague?
Yes, it's to weaponize the ability to turn everything else into elementals.
Yeah. So I think that like I want to provide Al Shaib the context of that. Like I want to let him because I spent oh, also hold on just 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Oh, good.
So I want to provide Al Shaib the context because I spent a lot of time learning about these chaos elementals and attempting to theorize what the church might be doing with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Morin would probably share the most recent theory, which was is the Efreet wanting to potentially use this, or is the church trying to use this to recruit more foot soldiers in this war against Alandare? And would the Efreet be interested in warring against the Alandari? And then above that question is would the adversary be interested in, like, would that be a way for the adversary to get into the world?
So he takes a deep breath and says, understand that the nature of conflict is not just direct conflict. There is an entire range of things it could be. Sometimes one fights another directly. You have sword, they have spear. You fight to see which is stronger, the weapon or the person. But other times you fight in a different way. The demons and devils, they wish to bring more to their side, to break a stalemate that is as old as anyone can remember. And in order to do so, they must draw in something from others. The nature of a demon is such it cannot be converted to be a devil. So too is the nature of a devil, it cannot be converted to be demon. Their core essences are too separate. So, since they cannot convert one another, since there can be no subsuming of one or the other, then they must reach out to others. They reach out in different ways, but for the same purpose, to grow and gain power for their side, to convert mortal kind directly to elemental soldiers would be very useful for the creatures whose base element is elemental. For the creatures who are base immortal, they instead do not care strongly about the body of the creature. They wish to bind and compact the soul. Gaining the power of a soul is incredibly valuable to someone who is immortal, and the Alandari, the devils, have ways to use that in their fight against the demons. I think this research is more direct than you are making it seem. The demons would benefit greatly from having others who desire to spread their plague, to spread their cause, to find a way to break out into the world, into a place where the devils would be forced to make their deals and bargains, individual things that are stronger than the conversion of the physical body of a single mortal, but they take time, they take effort. And as far as I can tell from my limited ability to see the world, the number of devils is even fewer now than it was when their war was young. Did that make sense to Morin? Or to Josh, I should say.
So the elementals would benefit from getting more foot soldiers. The devils would benefit from being able to interact with the mortal world to collect more souls.
Yeah, and basically, he's saying that the research and how to make this plague more virulent and to infect a whole bunch of people, there doesn't need to be a secondary objective. Like, that is the primary objective that would get the demons what they want. They want more bodies, more ability to have a foothold in the plains.
Okay. Interesting. Could this plague, insofar as it infects individuals and causes them to break down into chaos elementals, could that be used to change one's nature?
I do not believe it is strong enough to change the nature of things that have been able to retain their nature all of these many, many years since the queens have been gone. The creatures that were weak enough to have their natures and names changed have long since fallen to the changes of the world.
Okay.
So basically, yeah, it's possible, but he doesn't think anyone's still around that is weak enough to have that problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um. Interesting. Okay. Uh. So changing tack slightly. In addition to the ongoing research here about chaos elementals, there was also some work being done on a uh, I think I'd call it the entity. Do you know of what I speak?
I know by context, my friend. The place where I am bound, the ability that I have to see things around, is within the primary portion of your ship. It is not deep within the myriad of copies of mirrors folded one upon another. You're in character, you know that he can't really see inside of the ship where the where the labs are.
Ah, okay. Um, so the crew of this ship had what we now know to be a larval form of a watcher contained within that portion of the ship. And it seems that much of their research was on using it to conjure things that they desired. Are conjurations of this kind something that a watcher is known for? And to what purpose would a watcher be allowed to be captured?
You see him frown for a second and then think about it. It's. I believe the creature you mention is a beholder. But yes, that is one of the things that they can do. A difficult thing that exerts great energy from one of them, but yes, it is possible.
Was this entity on the ship prior to the church acquiring it?
It is not something that I could see, and the conversations that I could overhear were intentionally muffled when the church had control of the ship. There were people there that knew not to say certain things because I would be able to perceive them. Basically, his ability to understand what was going on the ship was way less before you guys had it.
Yeah.
Just because, not because like his power was less, but it was just because people knew to be secretive, and this is a place where they were working and being secretive rather than being like a place where people lived.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get a sense of like, did the church capture that or bring it on board?
He doesn't know.
Oh, I forgot the question I was going to ask.
I will say that one of the security things that you guys have, one of the security notes, talks about a transfer.
Oh, that's right. So I actually know when it was transferred to the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was the church that did it. Okay. Well, if the church is indirectly working for an Ifrit, to what end do you think that he would put a watcher aboard this ship?
They are creatures that deserve study. There were times when I would do similar things in places that I believed were safe and controlled environments. These creatures of the outside are difficult to comprehend, and comprehension is the first way of being able to resist.
Hmm. Would it go against the nature of the Ifrit to work with the adversary?
I do not know if it would be against their nature, but it would be against their pride. I do not wish to say it is impossible, because a great many things in this world that have been the way things always were have been shown to me to be just tradition, being held onto so tightly that it seems as if it is inviolable law. I expect it is very unlikely, but it is still possible.
And to the extent that your current bonds would allow it, and in the hypothetical where they were no longer present upon you, would you war against the adversary?
It is a creature that is specifically made to be against the Accords. It is against order on a level so fundamental, I would have a hard time imagining a way to not resist.
Because my companions and I seem to be working towards a goal of restoring the summer court. And I guess I'm wondering, is that helpful for opposing or warring against the brokenness in the world caused by the adversary? Or is that the potential fix for the damage that's been done?
In order to play the game, the great table must be set. And there are pillars that allow the table to be usable for such a game. The courts, they are some of the pillars. Without them, all is uneven. Any move, any placement of things could fall off into nothingness. The game will make no sense until the players are properly sat at the table. Your
Okay.
understanding of the summer court, would it help? I believe so. But does a table stand on a single leg? Not well.
Are the three courts are winter, summer, and something else, right?
Yes.
Are those one leg of the table? And are they all the legs of the table?
So he smiles and says, "It is neither thing," which is a good way to ask. It is neither a single leg, nor are all three of those you mentioned legs. The summer court and the winter court, opposing forces on either side, they would be pieces of this potential table. But they hold it in two ways, and there must be something to balance in between. In the past, the balance that was done here was done with deities, two other sets of primordial forces opposing one another. Summer on one end, winter on the other, and then, at the opposites of their tables, 90 degrees away, you would have two more opposites, the gods and the primordials. So
So it's more like a counterweight
yes.
situation.
So Al Shaib would basically draw like light in the air with his finger and show you
Mm-hmm.
basically a diamond or a square, and then in the corners of the square, the corners of the diamond, you've got on two opposing sides you've got summer and winter, and then on two opposing sides you've got primordials and gods.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. You have already advised us a great amount on how to find and restore the summer courts. We have returned the summer lady, and we have freed the queen that is by sword and by fire. But how can we restore the other legs, the other weights on this table to play our game?
You must understand what the basic powers and principles are. These are not individuals, these are not people. While rescuing the queen that is a noble cause, and The queen represents the power of the office of summer. It is not simply rescuing the queen that restores the table to balance. The queen brings with it the entire court. It brings with it the Celia chords. And should you balance the other end of the table, it would bring with it the uncelia chords, whose effects would ripple throughout all of reality. That is the part you must understand. It is not an individual thing. It is not free one thing, get another. Although there is admittedly overlap with the queens themselves. If you are looking for these other things, then you must understand that their nature is not as cohesive. There is not one great leader primordial from which all of their rules and powers grow. There is not one over God, one God who can be restored that would allow their power to spread through all the godly realms and allow order to be exerted upon the greater seas and the upper mirrors. No, the upper and lower mirrors must be restored in the nature of the way that those powers are. The upper mirrors are built not on individual gods or on sets of principles set down long ago, like the queens represent. They are based on individual ideals and resources of great power, centerpieces that must suffuse the upper planes in order for their power to be returned. They are the domains. The lower planes are the foundations of the universe. They have the core elements, the pieces of the world that are, not the things that people wish them to be or wish to make other things out of. This is fire and earth and water, basic things that bind together all living things and all non-living things. That is what must be done to bring the primordials back. They must be allowed governance over the pieces of the mirrors that are breaking and flowing apart from one another. They must be able to bind all mirrors to themselves by binding like to like, as is the primordial way. Fire to fire, water to water, earth to earth. When he starts talking, you can see that there's this like moment of like maybe not boredom, but like when he first kind of starts to get going, it's like he's saying something that he expects everybody knows. This is like common knowledge, so we've got to get over this before we can get to having this discussion. And then as he's talking and looking at your reaction, he realizes that, oh, maybe this is something he doesn't know, and then kind of goes faster and kind of digs into the explanation.
Mm-hmm. The upper and lower mirrors must be restored. And the way in which we restore these mirrors is by ourselves binding them
So
so that the primordials can govern
I will say
them.
that he uses different terminology. You guys have done enough spacefaring to know what he's talking about when he says upper and lower mirrors. Does Josh know what Al Shaib means when he says upper and lower mirrors?
Yeah, because the planes are like broken apart
Mm-hmm.
and they're at different time streams.
Mm-hmm.
And
What do you call the upper mirrors?
the let's see, the upper mirrors are gonna be is the Shadowfell? The Shadowfell's an upper mirror, right?
No, the Shadowfell and the in the Feywild are neither upper nor lower. They are considered the close mirrors to the Prime.
Ah, okay. Well, the lower mirror, would that be the upper mirror would be the astral sea?
Mm-hmm.
The lower mirror is going to be the elemental chaos.
Correct.
Um, so they... So he said that they must be allowed governance, the primordials must be allowed governance over the pieces of the mirrors that are breaking. The upper and lower mirrors must be restored in the nature of the way that their powers are, binding like to like in the lower plane. Or upper or mirrors.
So I sent you a link. That is what it's supposed to look like, i.e., that is the world before everything got thrown to shit.
Right. And the mirrors are breaking. But I guess do we know how they're breaking?
Not really.
Okay. So Ibn al-Shaib, I wield a spear crafted by Yansi bin. How what can I do to I guess actually the first question is, do the mirrors need to be restored in order for the primordials to govern them? Or is the primordials governing them the way they are restored?
The mirror's proper place is to exist by having their like to like brought together. For the chaos, it is like to like, an element. The primordials do not need to exist, as far as I can tell, for that to be a thing. But they bring so much like to like that their existence solidifies the foundations of the lower mirrors. If it is easier to comprehend, consider this fire. He turns back and you have the little campfire behind him. If I were to say to you that the use of this fire was light, you would wish to put more wood on the fire to make it burn stronger and brighter. It would illuminate this area, and in that area there would be light. Do you have to have someone? Does it have to be you that maintains the fire, that adds to it? Is there a way to create another system? You do not have to go for fire. Another part of fuel, maybe. The fire and light could be sustained with magic, could be sustained as something else. But if this fire was fire itself, an elemental of pure flame, it would generate light not because we wish it to, but because it is a natural byproduct of it existing. And if that elemental wished for power, it wished to draw more like to like, it would draw more and more fire to itself. And as it drew more fire to itself, so too would it give off more light. If our goal, then, was to generate the light, then having a creature that wished to be bigger, that wished to be stronger, and the byproduct of their strength was more light, would it not be a thing that we would want to feed such a creature?
I see.
Does Josh understand what the DM is saying with that?
Um, not 100%.
What is your translation from that, and then we'll go from there. Because the goal here is that Al Shaib is trying to explain things as best he can.
Yeah. Um, like I think I get the concept of what he's saying, but I don't know how it like translate to any tangible actions that can be taken.
True.
So we don't the primordials don't have to come back in order for the planes to be restored.
Mm-hmm.
To restore the planes, we need to bind like to like, and I don't really know what that means. But in the analogy that he gave, creating a bigger and bigger fire, if the goal of a fire is to provide light
Yeah.
or
So
to just be itself,
making a
then
bigger and
feeding
bigger fire is combining like to like. It's combining fire with fire, getting more fire, and the light is the effect it would have on the surrounding area, which in the analogy is binding the lower planes to each other.
So is fire, earth, and water, are those the three elements that make up this foundation for the elemental chaos, the lower plane, the lower mirror?
So he cocks his head aside and then he looks at you, and you see like a slow smile spread and say, "Are you not on good terms with your implement?"
Well, you specifically excluded that one, and that's why I was curious.
So he laughs and then says, "No, the primordials of air are important as well."
Okay. I mean, he's sitting here standing at the guy holding a weapon made by the primordial of air, and he's like, yeah, the three elements you need are fire, earth, and water.
Uh, you can kind of get that it's not necessarily like he's snubbing the element that you have,
Yeah,
but rather being like, you can't just use the one you have.
right.
Like, I'm not going to say you need air. You're holding the spear from Yanzi Bin.
Fair.
I think you've probably got that covered to some degree.
um, okay. And do you know of a lowercase e entity that could uh, by strengthening, well, actually, I guess the question is, are there primordials still out there, or do there need to be new ones?
The primordials, even in their destroyed forms, still exist, my friend. They are fundamental to reality in a way that is different for the gods. In a similar way that the gods' domains cannot be completely destroyed, but they can be locked away or hidden from the world, inaccessible, so too can the substance of the primordials be spread across the plains. They are still there, but their ability to form cohesive action has been lost in a time before even the greatest recent conflict with the adversary. So basically, the primordials are still around. They're just
Mm-hmm.
their essence and body is spread so thin over the elemental chaos that they don't really have any ability to act.
Okay. Why, if if the table is necessary for playing the game to prevent the adversary from taking over reality, why did the portions of the table seek the other's destruction?
It was in their nature before the agreement was made. There are many games being played on many different levels. There are some that say that this game is the only one that matters, and they are true to a certain degree. But it is not the only game being played. If all that needed to happen was that all four of the sides would get along and play their part, then the game would ever be in the favor of reality. But that is not the case. It is part of what they are that they resist, they fight against one another. Summer against winter, gods against the primordials. This is the way things have ever been, the way things were before nature, and it is the protection provided by creatures being as they are that allows them to not be corrupted, allows them to not have their portion of the table leg to be rotted away from the inside out. Suffice to say, the struggle against one another is necessary because they believe it is necessary, and they are protected from the consequences of going against that nature by continuing to struggle. There is much tension in the universe, but tension and conflict is life.
Okay. Um, so I guess the final question I would have would be, when first we met my patron, my patron was interested in speaking with you. Um, and I have since met others who wish to be hidden from him. Do you Would you be protected? Like, that's how Morin would ask it, but the wording itself is actually confusing. Does does Alshaib want to be protected from Shadow Mantle?
He smiles and says, I appreciate you are concerned, my friend, but the old ghost is no threat to me. I believe there is one of the problems that you see with the table involved with him. If only all of the four great pillars could align themselves, then the game could be played, the table even, the odds ever in the favor of reality. But everyone has their own motivations, their own agendas. He too is like that. If ever we could have a united front, perhaps we could restore this broken world. But there are individual motivations, and the older the motivation, the closer kept the secret, the harder it is for one to understand that risking it could be for the greater good.
And do you know his motivation?
He is a creature of great power. His motivation is The motivation of most creatures of such, to not have his power impinged upon, to gain more power, to maintain what he has. The old ghost has not played in the game for the struggles of other power in a very long time. But something has changed in him. Our conversation was not as predictable. It was not as stale as I had expected it to be. I have spoken to the ghost before, and he and I had an understanding. But something is stirring there, the faintest echo of change in something that has been immutable since before I was properly imprisoned. This change. I do not know if I should tell you to be wary of it or to be hopeful of it, but it is a change that one who is old and has talked to the old ghost before can recognize, and one such as yourself might not be able to see as any different than normal.
You said that he did not play at the table in a long time?
He had he had won. He set out for a victory, for something he believed to be the ultimate prize, many, many ages ago. And the old ghost won his victory, smote all of his enemies, struck down anyone who could oppose him. He claimed his great prize, and then what to do next? He had no purpose any longer. He had gained everything he wished to be able to gain. His ultimate objective achieved, he had nothing left to do, no other games left to play. He fell into a darkness of his own making for many, many years. And it was only small dalliances, little things that would bring him out of his stupor, and connections with others that allowed him to have contact. The last 3 times that the ghost and I have spoken, it has been because he has decided in his boredom and isolation to interact with those that offer him little in return. Small investments, small bargains being made, abandoned whenever they are not useful. It is in his nature to be selfish, but that power is different now, that he doesn't have anything he wants. How can one be truly selfish if one has no desires? It has been a struggle, but that struggle I did not see when he came and spoke with me last. I saw someone ready to risk, ready to put power on the table, ready to take actions not out of boredom, but out of something else. I do not know what this is. I do not know what dark purpose he has set his heart upon. But the fact that he has something to set his heart upon is different.
Hmm. What was his prize?
Al Shaib gives a big smile, and you see little bits of twinkled starlight in his eyes. Now that is information that must be asked for properly.
Josh is wondering, A, so that seems like it has to be like a wish or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, part of his three. Um, But Morin doesn't think that he has the ability to do that, right?
Has the ability to make a wish.
Yeah,
Correct.
to
Yeah.
use up. Okay.
Basically, until
Because Morin, or I'll show you, told Morin that.
yeah,
Because I think I tried to do it before.
right. Basically, he says that the person, no one else can sort of make wishes unless the person who's currently making their 3 can't.
Right.
Right. Like he has expended 1 wish towards one of many, which means she has 2 remaining, and while she has 2 remaining, other people cannot sort of skip the line.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that when Al-Shaib is saying, "Oh, you have to ask properly for that one," it's not. You can ask properly for that one.
Mm-hmm. You
Okay.
would have to ask properly for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Does Morin get the sense that when he's calling Shadow Mantle the old ghost, that it carries the same kind of tidal weight or similarity to the old soldier?
Sort of, yeah. Like it's a nickname, and from a lot of these things that are like variations on the theme of immortal, them calling something old means something very different. So like if he called him the ghost, that might be a name or title that would be used, but the fact that he refers to him as the old ghost means that he's drawing attention to the how old Shadow Mantle really is. He's cutting a very fine line between those terms, like with a bandsaw.
uh, yeah, we're doing bathroom renovations, and we're doing the demo ourselves. And I think Taryn has decided to test out. I don't know if you heard her in the background there.
I didn't. I heard the saw. I didn't hear her.
She just yelled through the door, "Sorry, love." um, so old soldier and old ghost, they're used in the same way to refer to these people.
Yeah, it's more along the lines of like it's not like a category, right? It's more of a it's more of a moniker that if you are very old, then that has weight in a group of people that are also very old.
Right. Okay. So,
By the same token, like he wouldn't call Queen Anne old.
right. Yeah. Um, was it Al-Shaib who called her the crippled queen?
That is the Sphinx that called her the crippled
That was
queen.
the Sphinx, right? Okay. Um, okay. So Shadow Mantle has suddenly found something that he's interested in for the
For
first time in a
clarity, the
long
Sphinx
time.
is also the one that called Aegis the old soldier.
Yes. But she did not call Shadow Mantle the old ghost.
Correct. She didn't call Shadow Mantle anything.
Mm-hmm. But she's also afraid of Shadow Mantle.
Yeah, I mean she is where she is because she does not want to interact with Shadow Mantle.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is something you learned from her, but also something you learned way long ago from the little, or that other people learned from the little vignette with Aegis. That's still in the Discord.
I don't think she didn't say it was because of Shadow Mantle though, just that she wouldn't go to the Prime.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Those ways are closed to me long ago. I'm honestly impressed, like, how much random little details I have recalled and have come up as relevant from that little vignette.
I mean, I'm constantly impressed with all of you guys and how much of my bullshit you come up with, because it allows me to be whatever the opposite of hand-holdy as a DM is. Like, I don't know, just be able to throw stuff out there and be like, here's just an incredible like wealth of information of stuff that's happening, and I kind of can trust that you're gonna sift through things, and some things you'll miss and some things you'll find, but you guys will pick up enough that things keep moving forward, right? That it's very little time that I have to be like, no, let's stop and have this conversation. Let's stop and talk about this. And even, there was one time recently where it was a moment of like, I think this is something that it's kind of on that borderline between like, should I bring it up and is this something that they picked up, which was with the placard that you got from the vault.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, thinking back on it, I'm like, I could have just left it alone. They would have been able to do stuff with it later, and I didn't even need to say anything.
Okay. I think that this is a lot of what I wanted from talking to Al-Shaib.
Mm-hmm.
I had written down some questions beforehand, and everything we've talked about kind of slots into them, and none of them have been ignored.
There is one thing that I intended to do, which I guess technically gets seen in the recording, but that's fine. Okay. You can notice that there's something slightly alien in the way that he responded to the whole, that is something that you have to ask me properly. The way that Al-Shaib talks to people and the way that he's sort of he's taking on that role of like being the teacher in like his office, right? Like you're the student, he's the teacher. You're not in a classroom setting. You're like going to him for office hours, right? That's it's the feel of the way that he talks to you guys when you come inside of his realm. And when he talked about asking properly, there is this sort of feverish like something, this sort of spark of energy and focus that then fades almost immediately after he says it. But there is a change in the way that he acts right when he says something like that.
Is it every time he says something like that, or was it specifically about this?
Every time he brings up the
Okay.
basically the reminder that people can use a wish to do something, there is a change in his personality or a change in his attitude for just a second.
Is that because he is wanting to be asked? And it is in his nature to provide answers to those kinds of questions?
That is a very reasonable thing to assume, because a lot of things that have nature, they want to fulfill them, even in the absence of everything else, right? Like it's not so much of we need to get to the end of these 3 wishes because you've got 3 and I need to move on or anything like that. You can figure out, especially from having like one-on-ones with him, that it's not that. It's this is a thing that he is somewhat compelled to do, and doing it has benefit, right? Like,
yes,
it has intrinsic value, whereas if in other situations, and this like came in play during last session, part of the reasons that I want to have this conversation is because you would sort of have this context for what happened last session, right? Because this technically takes place before last session.
Yeah.
Is when they had that thing of like, you know, the shoulder nudge or the elbow nudge of like, hey, he's trying to get you to use one of your wishes. That in like storybooks and in like the context of the world has a really negative connotation, right? That
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to get you to use a wish so he can twist it and fuck you over. But the more that you are able to talk to Al Shaib, the more you realize that it's not that he's trying to get you to use the wish because he wants to interfere with your life or anything like that. It's that's his nature. That's what he does. Is he grants these wishes, and doing so allows them to feel like comfortable and powerful and act in their like in the sort of most narrow definition possible of this is who I am.
Right. Okay. And I think I'd have to go back, but when what was the first wish or command that one gave Al Shaib?
I'm not going to spoil that.
Okay.
I would say ask Kylie because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is one of those things that I think will come back up. We'll come back around in the circle of this campaign.
Okay. Well, I guess sort of the reason I was asking is because I was trying to remember what Al Shaib's reaction was. Did it?
Oh, what? You guys weren't in his domain when he, I don't think, when he granted the first wish. But you guys got a little glimpse of incredible power, and then it went away. And
Yeah.
Al Shaib was. And then when you went to speak to him afterwards, he had previously looked like he was like completely devoid of anything, like didn't have any expression stuff. Like even though he was flayed and held up,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't respond to that. And then when you went to see him afterwards, then he had this sort of he was noticing the pain, but also having a conversation as more of a like a friendly conversation. So there's a change in the way that he treated things after the first wish.
Okay. We have to go find that recording. Okay, well then I guess my last question for Al Shaib would be, how long do you expect your domain to be inhospitable
He
to
shrugs and
people such
says,
as myself?
"This place is designed to suffuse and change energies. It is a place I have been able to change to my will to a great degree. I do not expect it will be a long time in terms that I am used to, but I believe it will be very long in terms you are used to before this place is considered safe for your kind. In short periods," he sort of gestures over to you, and you see this sort of red haze around you. "In short periods, I can twist the energies to avoid them causing you any harm, but it does take an effort of my will to make it done. And should I wish it not to be so, or should I be distracted, or tired, or overexerted in one means or another, the protections would fail and you would sicken."
Well, I thank you for the protection. We have come a long way in the short time we've known each other, you and I.
You. He takes a deep breath and then exhales and says, "You are considered an ally of one that is bonded to me. And part of our agreement was that I would not harm you by making my inner domain inhospitable. You do not need to thank me for upholding my end of the bargain. Though I understand, it is a mortal expression. You can tell there's a little bit of like he's aware that you don't mean it as an insult,
Mm-hmm.
but he has to take an extra step to not consider it an insult.
Okay.
Because a lot of these things that are either she or that are big on this whole like contract style nature, thanking them for upholding their end of the bargain implies that there was a potential that they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's not really a thing for people, but for them, it is a pretty big insult.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Right.
anything else? I think that's a heck of a vignette.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that for the purposes of things sort of like making not narrative sense, but like for the context of the narrative here, Al Shaib can't keep you in the domain, like can't keep you inside of his little pocket dimension for like hours at a time. And this
Mm-hmm.
conversation would have taken like a couple of hours. So what's gonna like how it actually exhibits itself is that he would bring you in, you'd have part of the conversation, you would leave, you'd spend most of a day outside and come back in. So this is sort of like a condensed version of you having conversations with Al Shaib over the course of a couple of days.
Okay. That makes sense.
And by that token, if you find out, oh, I think this needs to happen, or like we need to change this or the other around, just let me know. We can add stuff to this, and also if once you do it a couple of times and kind of get into this habit, if it is something you want to do in session where you're like, hey, Al Shaib, I would like to have counsel again and want to kind of go and have a little one-on-one with him, because that's the relationship that you're building with him, and that is also a relationship that one of many is building with him on a different subject. That is something that's going to be more doable, right? And this is something that I'm going to say to Josh. I think Morin would figure it out eventually, but I think one of many will figure it out before Morin will.
Okay.
Which is Al Shaib a lot of times didn't answer because you were always asking something from him. Whereas on this longer voyage, as you're kind of going in and talking with him, you guys are still sort of asking stuff with him, but it's more like you're talking to someone, like you're using him as a sounding board, right? You're hey, these are ideas that I have. What do you think? How does this work? This is what I'm planning to do. That sort of stuff, where there is more of that sort of like advisee relationship rather than or like teacher student relationship rather than the advisor advisee relationship, where it's like the advisor's completely ignored until like the king or or whatever is like, all right, you minister of commerce, what do you say about this issue? Like you only get to speak when you need to know a very specific thing. The
Yeah.
working on the language that one of many is doing is more of a work together than it is him doing something for you. And you can sort of tell that his attitude towards you guys on like a more personal level is getting better.
Okay.
Right?
Because that was definitely a component to having this conversation with Al Shaib was I want to learn more about things, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trying to get a thing from him.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing that Kylie said, which is the goal is having more of a relationship with Al Shaib, like as like a friend, as a colleague, than it is as someone that you're just constantly asking for him to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of those is a very unequal relationship, and even for the purposes of like, hey, we have contractually agreed to help free you, and you can do things to help us while we help free you. Like that back and forth is very transactional, And so having this less transactional relationship does seem to be paying off into the fact that he's answering more when you ask for him. Like if you call for Al-Shaib after it's been a few days of this, because the trip out is like 3 days, he will actually answer on a regular basis rather than kind of the sort of chance that he answers otherwise.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording, and yeah.